What drives someone to betray their country? Ideology, money, blackmail, or the dark corners of the soul that even the closest people don't suspect? Today, we'll pull back the curtain on the greatest spy dramas in U.S. history. These aren't just tales of classified documents and clandestine meetings. They're chronicles of shattered lives, broken fates, and trust turned into a deadly weapon. Jonathan Pollard, a civilian intelligence analyst for the United States Navy, was a man consumed by a divided loyalty. Bright, ambitious, but also perceived by his superiors as arrogant and emotionally volatile, Pollard harbored a passionate, lifelong dedication to the State of Israel. This intense ideological commitment festered within the heart of American naval intelligence, creating a walking, breathing security breach. In the mid-1980s, this internal conflict erupted into one of the most damaging espionage cases involving an American ally. Pollard began to systematically steal vast quantities of classified documents, not for an enemy, but for a friend. He wasn't just passing along stray reports. He was delivering entire libraries of secrets, using his top-secret clearance to access and photocopy thousands of documents on U.S. intelligence-gathering methods, weapons systems, and sensitive information on Arab nations. Unlike the ideological spies of the Cold War, Pollard's motives were a toxic mix of zealotry and greed. He was paid handsomely by his Israeli handlers. When his espionage was finally uncovered in 1985, he made a desperate dash for the Israeli embassy, seeking asylum, but was turned away, literally left on the doorstep. His arrest sent shockwaves through the U.S.-Israeli relationship. Sentenced in 1987 to life in prison, his case remained a source of immense controversy and diplomatic friction for decades. After serving 30 years, he was released on parole in 2015, eventually emigrating to Israel, where he received a hero's welcome. When an oath to one country is broken by devotion to another, where does allegiance truly lie? Aldrich Ames was the embodiment of institutional decay, a mole who burrowed so deep into the Central Intelligence Agency that he nearly destroyed it from within. A second-generation CIA officer, he was a 31-year veteran who presented a facade of a mediocre, unassuming, and often drunk bureaucrat. His colleagues saw his professional failings, but never suspected the profound treason that lay beneath. In 1985, driven by crushing debt from a lavish lifestyle and a bitter sense of being professionally undervalued, Ames made a fateful decision. He walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered to sell America's most sensitive secrets for cash. His betrayal was not ideological. It was a cold, transactional act of greed. Over the next 9 years, he methodically dismantled the CIA's network of Soviet assets. He handed over the names of virtually every valuable human source the U.S. had inside the Soviet Union. At least 10 of these agents were executed as a direct result of his treason. The information he provided led to the catastrophic failure of dozens of operations. In return, the KGB and its successor, the SVR, paid him over $4.6 million, allowing him to live a life far beyond the means of a government salary. The CIA's internal hunt for the mole was a years-long, paranoid, and soul-crushing failure, until the FBI finally zeroed in on his inexplicable wealth. He was arrested in 1994, and the scale of his betrayal horrified the nation. Sentenced to life in prison without parole, his name became a byword for the ultimate betrayal of trust. When the very man tasked with catching spies becomes the most destructive spy of all, how can an institution ever truly recover? Evgeny Buryakov represented the modern, subtle face of Russian espionage, a world away from the cloak-and-dagger theatrics of the Cold War. He was not a deep-cover illegal or a disgruntled military officer. He was a banker. Working as a deputy representative for Vneshekonam Bank, a Russian state-owned bank in Manhattan, he moved in plain sight, a seemingly legitimate professional in the world of international finance. This non-official cover was his greatest weapon. It allowed him to operate without the scrutiny that comes with a diplomatic passport. From 2012 to 2015, Buryakov, a sworn agent of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, was tasked with a specific mission: to gather economic intelligence. He wasn't stealing nuclear codes. He was seeking inside information on U.S. sanctions against Russia, developments in high-tech energy sources, and other financial data that could give Moscow an economic edge. He worked as part of a three-man spy ring, coordinating with two other SVR agents who were protected by diplomatic immunity. Their conversations, secretly recorded by the FBI, revealed a concerted effort to recruit American sources and pass information back to Moscow. His arrest in 2015 was a stark illustration that Russian intelligence gathering had evolved, focusing as much on Wall Street as on Washington, D.C. He pleaded guilty to conspiring to act as an unregistered agent of a foreign government, a lesser charge that avoided a sensational espionage trial. Sentenced to 30 months in prison, he was released early and deported to Russia in 2017. In a world where economies are weapons, where is the new front line of espionage drawn? Julius Rosenberg, an American electrical engineer in his early 30s, was a man whose quiet demeanor concealed a fervent, unyielding belief in communism. To his neighbors in New York, he was a family man, a father striving for a piece of the American dream. But this was a meticulously crafted facade. Beneath the surface, a chillingly calculated mind was at work, driven by an ideological fire that saw the United States not as his home, but as an empire to be balanced. During the fever pitch of the Second World War and the dawn of the Cold War, Rosenberg became the architect of a sophisticated espionage network for the Soviet Union. His position gave him access to sensitive military technology, but his masterstroke was exploiting the one connection no one would suspect: family. He recruited his own brother-in-law, David Greenglass, a technician working inside the sanctum sanctorum of American power, the Manhattan Project. The secrets he passed were not mere documents. They were the literal blueprints for the atomic bomb, information that would irrevocably alter the global balance of power. The trial was a flashpoint in American history, a raw nerve exposed. Testimonies from couriers like Harry Gold painted a damning picture of a man who saw his betrayal as a righteous act. As the judge declared during sentencing, his crime was worse than murder. In 1953, Julius Rosenberg was executed, leaving behind two orphaned sons and a nation grappling with a terrifying question. If a seemingly ordinary man could commit such an extraordinary betrayal, who could truly be trusted? David Greenglass stands as one of the most tragic and reviled figures in the annals of American espionage, a man whose betrayal was not just of his country, but of his own flesh and blood. A young Army machinist stationed at the top-secret Los Alamos laboratory during the Manhattan Project, Greenglass held a position of profound, if unknowing, importance. He was not a brilliant scientist, but a technician, a man who worked with his hands on the components of the atomic bomb. This access, combined with his family ties, made him an irresistible target for Soviet intelligence. Recruited by his brother-in-law, Julius Rosenberg, Greenglass began passing on crude but critically important sketches and technical descriptions of the implosion-type atomic bomb, the design used for the Fat Man device. His motivation was a mix of youthful communist sympathy and familial pressure. When the FBI's investigation began to unravel the atomic spy ring, Greenglass was arrested. Facing the death penalty, he made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He cooperated fully with the prosecution. His testimony, and that of his wife Ruth, became the cornerstone of the government's case against the Rosenbergs. He directly implicated his brother-in-law, and most damnably, his own sister, Ethel, claiming she had typed up his handwritten notes. This testimony, later admitted by Greenglass to have been perjured to protect his wife, sent his sister to the electric chair. In exchange for this ultimate betrayal, he received a sentence of 15 years, serving just over 9. He was released in 1960 and lived the rest of his life under an assumed name, a man forever defined by the moment he sacrificed his sister to save himself. What is left of a man's soul when he buys his own life with the death of his family? George Trofimov was a man who lived a lie for a quarter of a century. A retired colonel in the United States Army Reserve, he was the highest-ranking U.S. military officer ever convicted of espionage. To his colleagues at a U.S. Army intelligence center in Nuremberg, Germany, he was a congenial, if unremarkable, civilian administrator. Born in Germany to Russian parents, he cultivated an image of a staunchly anti-communist American patriot. This persona was his shield. Beginning in 1969, Trofimov, a man in a position of immense trust, began photographing and passing thousands of classified documents to the KGB. His gateway to treason was his foster brother, Igor Susamihil, a priest in the Russian Orthodox Church who was also a KGB agent. Motivated primarily by money to support a comfortable lifestyle, Trofimov methodically betrayed his adopted country for 25 years. He handed over more than 50,000 pages of intelligence, including detailed U.S. assessments of Soviet military capabilities and plans for NATO forces. After the fall of the Soviet Union, his trail went cold, and he retired to a quiet life in Florida, believing he had gotten away with it. But the FBI never gave up. In a brilliant sting operation in 2000, undercover agents posing as Russian intelligence officers lured him into a meeting where he confessed to his long-dormant espionage career on tape. At his trial in 2001, a prosecutor stated Trofimov turned his back on his uniform, his flag, and his country. Sentenced to life in prison, he died behind bars, a relic of the Cold War whose treachery was a slow, patient, and devastating betrayal of his oath. What happens when the uniform of a patriot is nothing more than the costume of a spy? Dr. Klaus Fuchs was a man of two worlds, a brilliant German theoretical physicist who sought refuge from the Nazis in Britain, only to become a traitor to the West. He was a key scientist on the Manhattan Project, his mind one of the few on Earth that could grasp the terrifying power being unlocked in the deserts of New Mexico. Colleagues saw him as a reserved, intellectual, and dedicated contributor to the Allied war effort. But beneath this scholarly exterior lay a secret, unwavering allegiance to the Communist Party. Fuchs was not motivated by money or blackmail, but by a powerful, and in his view, moral conviction. He believed that a single superpower holding a monopoly on nuclear weapons would lead to global tyranny. And so, in a shocking act of intellectual arrogance and ideological faith, he decided to level the playing field himself. For years, he methodically passed on highly classified technical information about the atomic and hydrogen bombs to his Soviet handlers, including Harry Gold. His betrayal was a staggering breach, accelerating the Soviet nuclear program by years. When British intelligence finally cornered him in 1950, he delivered a calm, detailed confession, explaining his actions with a chilling sense of intellectual justification. "I had to obey my conscience," he stated, a phrase that starkly illustrated the chasm between his personal morality and his national duty. Convicted in the United Kingdom and sentenced to 14 years, he served 9 before moving to East Germany, where he was hailed as a hero. When a man of genius turns his greatest gift into a weapon against his protectors, what does that say about the nature of loyalty itself? Ethel Rosenberg was, to the world, a wife and a mother, her life seemingly revolving around her 2 young sons and her husband, Julius. In a society that defined women by their domestic roles, she fit the part. Yet prosecutors and history would paint a far more complex and damning portrait. While Julius was the operator, the head of the atomic spy ring, Ethel was presented as the indispensable partner, the quiet enabler whose conviction was the glue that held the conspiracy together. The prosecution's case hinged on the testimony of her own brother, David Greenglass, who claimed Ethel was not just a passive accomplice, but an active participant who typed up the stolen nuclear secrets. This single, powerful image, a mother transcribing the secrets of mass destruction at her living room table, sealed her fate in the minds of the jury and the public. Her defenders argued she was a pawn, used by the government as leverage to force her husband to confess and name other agents. They portrayed her as a victim of the era's hysteria, a woman condemned more for her political beliefs than for any concrete action. Despite worldwide appeals for clemency, she maintained her innocence to the very end. In 1953, she followed her husband to the electric chair, becoming the only female civilian executed for espionage in American history during the Cold War. Her final letters spoke of her love for her children, a tragic counterpoint to the state's narrative of a cold, calculating traitor. Did her silence protect a conspiracy, or was it the final defiant act of a woman who believed she was innocent? William Fisher, better known by his alias Rudolf Abel, was a spy from a different world. He was not a citizen who betrayed his country. He was a professional Soviet intelligence officer, an illegal, living deep undercover in the belly of the beast. He arrived in the United States in 1948, assuming the identity of a painter and photographer named Emil Goldfuss and setting up a studio in Brooklyn Heights. He was the quintessential mole, patient, disciplined, and a master of tradecraft. For nearly a decade, he skillfully managed a network of spies in the U.S., coordinating the collection of intelligence on American atomic facilities and military plans. He communicated with Moscow using sophisticated tools for the era: shortwave radios, hollowed-out coins, and microdots. He was not a traitor in the American sense. He was an enemy operative, a soldier fighting a silent war. His meticulously constructed world came crashing down in 1957, not because of the FBI's brilliance, but because of the weakness of his own subordinate. His radio operator, Raino Heihanen, a man prone to drink and fear, defected to the American embassy in Paris and exposed him. When the FBI came to his hotel room, they found a man of quiet dignity who refused to cooperate. He was tried and convicted of espionage and sentenced to 30 years. Yet his story didn't end in a prison cell. In 1962, in a scene that would define the Cold War, he was exchanged on the Glienicke Bridge in Berlin for the captured American U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers. He returned to the Soviet Union a hero, a testament to a different kind of loyalty. When the enemy is not a citizen who breaks an oath, but a soldier who keeps his, how does a nation measure the threat? John Anthony Walker Jr. turned treason into a family business. A U.S. Navy chief warrant officer and communications specialist, he was a man who held the keys to the kingdom. He had access to the cryptographic systems and communication codes that protected America's naval secrets. In 1967, struggling with debt, he walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and sold a classified document, an act that began an 18-year career in espionage that would be described by the Pentagon as one of the most damaging in history. But Walker's betrayal went far beyond his own actions. It became a malignant cancer that he spread to those closest to him. He recruited his own brother, a retired Navy lieutenant commander, his son, a seaman in the Navy, and his best friend, a senior chief radio man. Together, the Walker spy ring provided the Soviet Union with a staggering volume of information, an estimated 1 million classified messages. The Soviets were able to decipher secure U.S. naval traffic, giving them a terrifying advantage during the height of the Cold War. It effectively gave them a window into the mind of the U.S. Navy. The ring was not undone by brilliant counterintelligence work, but by a deeply personal betrayal. Walker's ex-wife, aware of his activities for years, finally reported him to the FBI. He was arrested in 1985 after being caught making a dead drop. In a deal to gain leniency for his son, Walker pleaded guilty and provided a full confession of his sickening family enterprise. Sentenced to life in prison, he died in 2014, a man who not only betrayed his country, but corrupted his own bloodline for profit. What does it say about a man when his ultimate legacy is teaching his own son how to be a traitor? Dr. Alan Nunn May was a British physicist, but his act of treason took place on North American soil, striking at the heart of the wartime alliance. As a member of the British delegation to the Manhattan Project, he worked in Canada and the United States, a trusted scientist contributing to the most secret and powerful undertaking of the century. Like his contemporary Klaus Fuchs, May was driven by a political conviction that ran deeper than his national allegiance. He was a communist sympathizer who believed that the Soviet Union, as an ally in the war against fascism, deserved to share in the technological breakthroughs being made. He felt it was dangerous for the United States to have a monopoly on atomic power. And so, acting on this personal political creed, he became one of an informal group of atomic spies. In 1945, he met with a Soviet intelligence officer and handed over not just technical information about atomic research, but also physical samples of enriched uranium-235 and U-233. It was a tangible, material betrayal. His espionage was uncovered after the defection of a Soviet cipher clerk in Canada, Igor Gozenko, whose revelations exposed a web of Soviet spying in the West. Arrested in Britain in 1946, May confessed quickly. In court, he delivered a statement reflecting his conflicted mind, claiming he acted under a strong moral compulsion. He was sentenced to 10 years of penal servitude, but was released in 1952 after serving just over 6. His case was one of the first major public revelations of Soviet atomic espionage, a shocking curtain raiser for the Cold War paranoia that would soon engulf the world. When a scientist believes he is serving a higher cause than his own country, who is he truly serving? Harry Gold was the invisible man, a ghost moving through the shadows of the Cold War. A Swiss-born biochemist, he was outwardly unassuming, a quiet professional who blended seamlessly into the fabric of American life. This very anonymity made him the perfect instrument for espionage. He was not an ideologue in the same fiery mold as the Rosenbergs. Instead, he was a courier, a human vessel for secrets of unimaginable consequence. His journey into treason began in 1934. A slow descent motivated by a complex mix of communist sympathies and a desperate need for purpose. For years, he was a dutiful cog in the Soviet intelligence machine, a reliable and unseen hand. His moment of terrible significance arrived when he became the critical link between the brilliant physicist Klaus Fuchs and the Rosenberg spy ring. It was Harry Gold who met Fuchs in secret, receiving the complex scientific data and detailed drawings of the atomic bomb. His confession, after being identified by Fuchs, was the key that unlocked the entire conspiracy. He cooperated extensively with the FBI, his testimony acting as the first domino that led to the arrests of Greenglass and, ultimately, the Rosenbergs. His cooperation saved him from the death penalty. Sentenced in 1950 to 30 years, he was paroled in 1965, a man who had held the fate of the world in his hands and traded it away, living out the rest of his days in quiet obscurity. How does a man, so central to a world-changing act of treason, simply fade back into the society he so profoundly betrayed? Ariel Weinman, a petty officer in the U.S. Navy, represented a newer, more brazen type of spy, one not necessarily driven by grand ideology, but by a chaotic mix of ego, grievance, and greed. Serving aboard the USS Albuquerque, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, Weinman had access to highly sensitive information. In 2005, this young sailor, who had a history of disciplinary issues, made a decision that put national security at grave risk. He deserted his post, but not before stealing classified documents and a laptop containing critical intelligence about his submarine's operations, its Tomahawk missile systems, and intelligence collection methods. His goal was simple and audacious: to sell these secrets to the highest bidder. He traveled to Austria and Bahrain, making contact with individuals he believed could broker a deal with a foreign government, believed to be Russia. His actions were not the work of a sophisticated deep-cover agent, but of an angry and opportunistic insider. He was a disgruntled employee whose workplace happened to be a billion-dollar weapon of war. His espionage career was short-lived. He was arrested in 2006 after being lured back to the United States. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, he struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to espionage and desertion. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Weinmann's case was a stark reminder that in the modern era, the most significant threats can come not from lifelong, dedicated moles, but from impulsive, discontented individuals with access to a keyboard. When personal resentment is armed with classified access, how vulnerable does a nation become? Robert Hanssen was a ghost, a man who haunted the Federal Bureau of Investigation for over 2 decades. On the surface, he was a paradox: a devout Catholic, a father of 6, and a seasoned counterintelligence agent known for his expertise in technology and his socially awkward, even severe, demeanor. He was the man America trusted to hunt down spies like Aldrich Ames. But in a shocking turn, Hanssen was a far more prolific and damaging traitor. His espionage began in 1979, a betrayal that predated Ames by 6 years and would continue, undetected, for 22 years. His motives were a complex and dark tapestry of financial need, ego, and a deep-seated psychological need for control and risk. He never met his Soviet or Russian handlers, operating with meticulous tradecraft through a series of dead drops and anonymous letters. He compromised an astonishing range of national secrets, including the identities of double agents, details of America's nuclear continuity of government program, and in a stunning act of audacity, he revealed the existence of a multi-million-dollar FBI tunnel built under the Soviet embassy in Washington. For his services, he received over $1.4 million in cash and diamonds. His long reign of treason was a profound institutional failure for the FBI. He was finally caught in 2001 after the Bureau paid a former KGB officer for a file that contained a recording of Hanssen's voice. He pleaded guilty to 15 counts of espionage and was sentenced to life in prison, where he died in 2023. How can a man charged with protecting his nation's secrets spend a lifetime selling them, all while sitting just a few desks away from those trying to catch him? The consequences of these betrayals aren't measured only in billions of dollars in damage or years of setbacks to national security. They're measured in human lives, those of agents exposed and executed, and those of the spies and their families, forever broken by their choices. These dramas expose the vulnerability of even the most secure system, because its weakest link is always a person, with their passions, flaws, and moral dilemmas. They make us question the nature of loyalty and the price we pay for breaking it. And the big question remains unanswered: how can society protect itself from those who live among us, but wage a secret war against us? How can we strengthen and restore trust in the institutions meant to protect us when their very core is sometimes corrupted by betrayal? What do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you believe we can prevent such betrayals? Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on new investigations. Give this video a like if it made you think.